Julianne Moore. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing this film with us. It's such an incredible performance. Congratulations, first of all.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. I live 45 minutes away in Montauk, so I'm very happy to be here.
Glad we can make it easy for you tonight. We could start off, I guess, first by talking about your collaboration with Pedro here. He is one of my favorite directors of all time and just this incredible auteur. What did you learn from this experience with him, and what was it like to collaborate on this film together?
Well, first of all, it was a tremendous honor to be asked to be in his first English language feature film. I never imagined that would be a possibility. I think, when I first encountered his films, he has such an original voice, such an arresting, humane, humorous, beautiful way of looking at the world. And I think as an actor, I thought, wow, would it be possible to work with someone like that? Everyone kept sort of teasing this idea that maybe someday he would work in English. That never happened. But so I really thought it was a pipe dream. And then one day I opened up my email in the morning, and there was a message from him saying he was doing this movie in English with Tilda, and would I join them? And I was like, whoa. So it was so extraordinary, so out of the blue, and such an incredible challenge too. How do you, as an actor, you're always like, how do I enter into someone else's point of view? That's sort of what we do. And when you've seen it, when you've known it, but you haven't encountered it, it was. Well, I always say Edu Grau, who was our DP, when we were all starting production, he said, we are all here because of the way this man sees the world. And so it was our responsibility to try to figure that out. And it wasn't clear to me, actually, how he saw it and how he saw us until I saw the film. Because it's so much a sum of its parts. It's so much about how he sees people and women and the world and colors and wardrobe, and there's such an incredible sense of height to it. It's like Tilda always says, it's like everything's sort of on high heels, everything's sort of up, everything's like a fairy tale, and yet at the same time it's like deeply, deeply grounded in real feeling.
The way he works with kind of the visual language and all of his work is so special and astounding. We see that here. I'd love to hear a bit about kind of that visual collaboration you had together throughout this project.
Well, it was very evident when we first got to Madrid and we started having the costume fittings, because Pedro comes to every fitting, which is very unusual for a director. And there would be all of these clothes and all of these colors, and he would say, like, more color, I want more, I want more. And of course I was like, no one wears a lot of color in New York. That's when you realize, like, it's not New York. It's Pedro's New York. It's his dream of New York. I actually have to say, like, a funny thing, when Tilda and I were in the set for the hospital, it was early on in the film, we just started working together, and there's a backdrop there, and the backdrop was of the East River and the east side of Manhattan. I said, Tilda, look out there. I said, that's the east side of Manhattan. I said, so that means that we're on Roosevelt Island. I said, do you know what hospital's on Roosevelt Island? A mental hospital. Anyway, so that everything, that idea that it's his dream. It's the way he sees, and the colors and the frames, that beautiful house with those trapezoidal windows and the mimosas on the table, and it was all of it added to the feeling and the tone constantly.
You brought up Tilda, and she's also so wonderful in this film, and you make such an amazing pair on screen, and it's such a film about companionship in many ways. I would love to hear about your collaboration with her and how that idea of companionship worked into your performance.
I'm the mutt to her Jeff. I love her so much. I mean, she and I think we'd known each other like a little bit, just to say hi, mostly at work events, film festivals, that kind of thing, and always admired her. And she doesn't disappoint. She's a wonderful, very, very generous partner. We're a month apart in age. We have kids the same age. We've had a lot of similar life experiences, and yet we didn't know each other, but kind of came together and became friends in real time. And sometimes she said a beautiful thing too, where she thinks of us sometimes as one performance, because it is really about this relationship. It's about how, I think really the most profound thing that you can do in life is witness somebody else's life, because honestly, how do you know you're alive if someone hasn't seen you? And so that's sort of that's what we give each other. That's why we value relationships and community and place in the world and all of that, because that's sort of how we know who we are in relationship to someone else. And with her, like I said, I couldn't ask for a better, more communicative and more emotionally connected partner. We just had a wonderful time together.
Yeah, the idea of being a witness, I think, is such an important part of this film as well. And your character, Ingrid, is very much witnessing all the main plot elements happen to somebody else and is just sort of there along for the ride. But then at the end, in that final scene, we see this kind of change bubble up within her as well. Can you talk about how you approach that kind of role as a witness, as an actor, while still kind of building that character's journey?
Well, there is there's a very active part. It's like sometimes in a movie they say, oh, someone's talking and someone's listening, and it sounds like, well, the energy is that way. But in life, we know that if you're in a conversation and someone else is talking, you're not absent. You're very much active. You're very much connected to it. And this is, I think Ingrid shows up, as an old friend, not knowing what's going to happen, but with this willingness to be with her, to listen to her, to be by her side, to let her talk. She's someone, Martha needs to talk, and Ingrid is there to listen and to help her. But then there is this tremendous transference too, that it's almost like Martha says, here, take my life, take my experience, remember me, and remember me too. And then she kind of takes all the information and gives it to her daughter, which, I don't know. I've certainly had this experience in my life where I've had people, I had a woman say beautiful things to me about my mother after she died, and it was such a gift, because it was like this woman had seen something that I hadn't seen, just because she lived on the same street. And that idea that you can communicate someone's love for someone else in that way, it was just it's pretty profound, I'd say.
There are these really tender moments, just the kind of in-between moments in the film too. Like one of my favorite scenes is when they're just watching movies together. It's so beautiful. But then, I think you can really say this, a lot of people might say this film's about death, but it's also about what it means to be alive and the significance of that. I'm curious, through this character and this role and this project, what you've taken away from this character and how it's kind of shaped your perception of all of that.
Well, I think we are most alive in the presence of loss or death or anything that, it's like that Tibetan saying about understanding that the glass that you're carrying is broken, that is not, it's always broken, and then you treasure it that much more. I think anything that brings us to an understanding that this is a temporary state, and it is, it allows us to feel more deeply and be more present and be more loving and do the things that we want to do and be there for the people that we care about and make everything bigger and brighter and bolder. And I think that's what this is about. These women are living. They're every single minute that they have together is about the life that they have together. And then it's done. And I think that's why we're so baffled by death too. It's like, wait, how can it just go and go and go and then stop? And yet it does. We know it does. But that the exploration of that, like I said, makes us, I think, that much more alive. I hope.
Absolutely. There's time for some audience questions. Anybody out there have a question? Hey, don't be shy.
She's about Montauk
right here.
And Gansett.
What's your question?
I was just struck by the color that's used, and it's so vibrant and
does Pedro, you know, I wonder, the question was about, like, was there significance when the red switch, where, you know, sometimes I have the red and then Tilda has the red, and like the red lipstick in particular. I think it's that kind of, like, that vibrancy, it's that sense of, like, life. But Pedro personally loves color. You know, he'd show up with a pink sweatshirt on every day, or, you know, a bright blue pants, and, you know, he just likes to surround himself. The first time I went to his apartment, I was absolutely stunned, because I was like, oh my God, that's the kitchen I've seen in every single movie of his. That's the red kitchen. So his whole, so many of his movies they're places he's been, they're the people that he's known, actual crew members you'll see, like, walk through his films. Everything to him is deeply, deeply personal. So I think he just loves it. And he also loves women, and he loves beauty, and he wanted us to look our best, you know? Oddly, it was this wonderful things, like, here are these, you know, women alone together. Clearly they're dressing for each other, because there's nobody else around, right? And they're made up, you know? I was like, my character's this writer who has a lot of time to get dressed and put her makeup on every morning. But how beautiful, you know? I mean, that he values that. He values beauty, and I think beauty in human form too.
Any other questions right here?
I have one question. There's a lot of Bottega throughout the film. Did you help with the costuming and putting that together? Because you see it throughout the film, just the bags.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Thank you. Matthew Jackett, who's the designer for Bottega, was very, very generous and actually helped us a lot. Because believe it or not, this is not a huge budget, this movie. So there are a lot of the things that we had access to were people being generous with us in the film. Thank you.
Oh, over there. Yeah.
I love when Ingrid looks for the door every morning. That's, like, I think, a very profound part of the film, seeing her expression. But in the scene when the wind has closed the door, and then you are outside, is it grief? Is it sorrow? Is it anger? Is it frustration? And then subsequently, when she's not done it yet, what is that emotion that the character's feeling?
I think it's all of that, you know. I think there's shock, you know. Initially you're like, oh my God, you know, it's like, oh, the door's shut, she must be dead, oh my God. And then there's that moment of, like, of sadness, deep sadness and fear, I think, too. And then, of course, frustration and anger, like a child. Like, well, I love that line, I thought you were dead. You know, I mean, that's like when you get angry at someone because they're late and you've imagined a car crash and stuff, and you're so frustrated because your feelings are so big. And there's something humorous about it too, you know. Pedro has the ability to really show us what we look like when we cry, you know, how deeply we feel it, and yet if you kind of step back a little bit, how funny it is too, you know. He did that when I first saw Women on the Verge of Nervous Breakdown, and Carmen Moore is, like, sobbing in that taxi cab, and I couldn't stop laughing. I'd never seen anything where that was juxtaposed that way, and he does that here too, you know. He lets us see our frailty, and but also our deep emotion, moments like that.
Yeah, right there.
So in the end, when Ingrid's daughter shows up, it's actually Tilda Swinton.
When Martha's daughter shows up,
Martha's
yeah.
daughter, yeah. Her daughter shows up. It's actually Tilda Swinton playing her.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that was obviously intentional. What was the kind of reason?
I mean, for me, I was touched by it because I'm someone who looks, you know, I look very much like my mother, and I've had that experience in my life where, as I got older, people were, like, shocked by how much I look like my mother, and I feel like that's not uncommon, you know. So I think that wonderful thing too of that kind of that genetic sameness, and yet the difference. They're very different women. And I think allowing Ingrid to see that and to be touched by it, to be moved by it, and to see also that the human continuum, you know, we do go on in others, in a sense. So you actually kind of see that symbolically with Tilda playing both parts.
Right there.
I think this was one of the best films of Almodóvar. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's very unusual to have a film. Where was the film done? In the country, in the woods.
Oh, Madrid, man. Everything was in Madrid. That's the thing. That's everything. We had about 2 weeks in New York, and you can see this stuff. We're on Fifth Avenue. The bookstore was in Montclair, New Jersey, but the House in the Woods was in El Escorial. You actually see El Escorial in Pain and Glory when Antonio Banderas' character goes to the country. That's sort of like a suburb of, not a suburb, but it's like a very lovely town about an hour outside of Madrid, and that's where that house was. Everything that you see, all the interiors that you see were all built on sound stages in Madrid. We rehearsed there. You know, that's Pedro's world. That's where his production company is. That's where he lives. That's where he's comfortable working. So that was the other thing that's really unusual too, is here we were as English speakers making this movie about New York that took place entirely in Spain. So it was very unusual.
Yeah, right there.
What do you think was the reason Ingrid changes her mind and decides to actually do it? What was the switch there?
I think it's, you know, friendship, kindness, humanity. She doesn't want to do it, you know. She doesn't. It's like she's deeply afraid of death, and it's a lot to ask. But she's just she can't not do it. She can't say no. And you hear it in the conversation she has with Damien too. She goes, "I'm not even her first choice. She has 3 people first. You know, I'm not even her best friend. I'm her friend from years ago when we were in our 20s, you know." But the beauty of it is that Ingrid steps up. And I think that there is something about the people who step up when something is, you know, it's not always who you expect. I think that probably Martha expected that Stella would, or those other, you know, those other women, and they didn't. But this woman from her past was the person who came to the hospital, sat there every day, and finally was like, "Okay, I'll do this for you." So it's sometimes surprising, you know, those relationships, how they develop and how they endure and what they can offer us. But I think Ingrid is that kind of person, someone who shows up for people.
Yeah, over here.
Hi, yeah. What was Pedro Almodóvar's direction style with you? How did he discuss the material with you or approach you on the set?
He's very specific. You know, it's nothing is random with Pedro. You know, he writes all his own screenplays. This he wrote and then had translated by several different people, and then we worked on it together. But he'd be very, you know, even his language, you know, because the language has a slight sense of artificiality to it, and so does his language in Spanish. It's sometimes formal, or sometimes feels like not quite a vernacular, you know. So it's like I said, everything is really through his lens. It's very important that even with the clothes, to be like, that coat has too big a back. I don't like it. You know, I don't see it that way. You know, the way he communicates with these kind of beautiful frames and wonderful compositions. There's real specificity to the way he directs. He's not the kind of director who says, "Well, let's just see what happens." You know, Pedro knows what's going to happen, and he communicates that. He's like, this is how this goes. You know, specific about his blocking, specific about his language, about his composition. So he's incredibly exacting.
We have time for one more question. You can take this one right here.
So, what do you think inspired you to make this film? Did you have a friend who was associated or a family member who had decided to do this week?
No, she was just saying what inspired Pedro to make this, and was this he had a friend or a family member who's made this decision. You know, I think you read the book, you know, Sigrid Nunez book, What Are You Going Through? Was actually, Sigrid even says, like, she credits her translator with this because it was a big hit in Spain, and Pedro read it, and really, really loved it, and felt that it was not a book that he could adapt because there were all these different strains to it. But this one story of these friends really struck him, and that's when he decided to adapt it. And I do think that, I feel like this movie is also a companion piece with Pain and Glory, which really is about somebody dealing with their own, you know, medical issues and sort of like later in life themes. So I think that, you know, it has to do with probably where he is and what he's thinking about, but really, he really was just inspired by Sigrid's novel. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's all we have time for tonight. Thank you so much. Congratulations.